In the year 2023, a quiet economic threshold was crossed in millions of households. The average American family began spending more money each month on their collection of digital and physical subscription services than they did on their own household electricity bill. This small, almost unnoticed fact is not just a piece of trivia about our changing media habits. It is the subtle, foundational blueprint for a future that is rapidly redesigning our physical world, a world where the very concept of owning things is becoming a relic of the past. It's a change happening, not with a dramatic announcement, but in the gentle, recurring hum of automatic monthly payments that we've all grown accustomed to. This leads us to a fundamental question about the world we are building for the year 2040. How is the ancient concept of ownership, the bedrock of personal wealth and stability for centuries, being systematically replaced by a universal model of temporary access? And what does that transformation truly mean for our autonomy, our economic future, and even our sense of self? To understand this profound shift, we need to look beyond the convenience of a streaming service or a meal kit delivery. We will trace the historical roots of this idea, beginning not with a car subscription, but with the moment a physical record collection became a cloud-based library. We will analyze the powerful technologies, like the Internet of Things, that are providing the technical backbone for this new world, turning every object in our homes into a controllable, billable service. We'll weigh the compelling economic logic that drives global corporations towards this model of recurring revenue, and what it really means for a family's finances over a lifetime. And finally, we will map out the several possible futures that diverge from our present trajectory, from a seamless, sustainable utopia of access over excess to a fragile world of absolute corporate dependency. The story of our future relationship with the material world is already being written, not in grand manifestos, but in the terms and conditions we agree to without reading. The very idea of life as a service is expanding from the digital to the tangible with astonishing speed. It began with software, where companies like Adobe and Microsoft discovered that charging a monthly fee for their creative and productivity suites was infinitely more profitable than a one-time sale. This conditioned an entire generation of professionals and creators to accept that the most critical tools of their trade would never truly belong to them. They were simply renting access, and that access could be revoked at any time. This model, proven to be a financial titan, then conquered entertainment. Netflix, Spotify, and Kindle Unlimited replaced shelves of DVDs, CDs, and books with infinite, yet ephemeral, libraries. The bargain we accepted was simple and seductive. Trade the permanence of ownership for the convenience of boundless access. Why own 1,000 albums when you can stream 100 million? The psychological shift was masterful. The feeling of being burdened by physical possessions was subtly cultivated, while the freedom of a minimalist, access-based lifestyle was celebrated. But this was only the prelude. The true revolution begins when this logic is applied not just to data, but to solid matter. Think of the modern automobile. A decade ago, you bought a car. Today, you are increasingly encouraged to lease it or subscribe to it. Features within the car you possess, like heated seats or enhanced horsepower, are now being turned into monthly subscriptions themselves, capable of being switched on or off remotely by the manufacturer. This isn't a hypothetical future. It's a business model already being implemented by major automakers like BMW, and Mercedes-Benz. The car in your driveway might feel like yours, but it is behaving more and more like a piece of software. Its functionality dictated not by its physical engineering, but by the status of your account. This same principle is being embedded into everything. The smart refrigerator that orders your groceries could one day refuse to open if a subscription payment is missed. Your home fitness equipment, your designer furniture, even your power tools could all be tethered to a service agreement. Each object becomes a node in a network, a vessel for a service rather than a standalone possession. The appeal, as always, is framed as a benefit to you, the user. You are freed from the burdens of maintenance, of repair, of obsolescence. Your home and life can be constantly upgraded to the latest models, seamlessly and without the friction of selling the old to buy the new. You are no longer a consumer, but a subscriber, a member of an exclusive service that caters to your every need. This is the seductive promise that is driving this transformation. It speaks to our desire for simplicity, for efficiency, and for a life less cluttered. The underlying architecture for this future is being built by logistics giants who have mastered the art of moving physical goods around the planet with incredible speed. A world of subscription products only works if the delivery, return, and refurbishment of those products is virtually frictionless. Companies like Amazon have spent decades creating precisely this system, a global circulatory system ready to manage a constant flow of items between warehouses and homes. The infrastructure isn't coming. It's already here, waiting for the product ecosystem to fully align with its capabilities. This shift represents one of the most significant, yet least discussed, economic transitions of our time. It is a quiet rewiring of the relationship between the individual and the corporation, between the citizen and the material world. For centuries, the path to middle-class stability in many societies was marked by the slow accumulation of assets: a home, a vehicle, tools, quality furniture. These were things that could be paid off, that held value, that could be passed down to the next generation, providing a foundation of wealth. The subscription model fundamentally alters this equation. It proposes a future where the average person accumulates not equity, but a portfolio of recurring monthly expenses. It suggests a world where a small number of mega corporations own almost everything, and the vast majority of the global population pays them for temporary access to the necessities of life. This isn't necessarily a consciously malicious plan, but rather the logical endpoint of a corporate imperative for predictable, endless growth. A one-time sale is a finished transaction. A subscription is a relationship, a perpetual stream of revenue that is far more valuable to shareholders and market analysts. Before we explore the darker potential of this model, it is crucial to understand its utopian vision, the one its proponents sincerely believe in. In this ideal future, waste is dramatically reduced. Since companies retain ownership of their products, they are heavily incentivized to design them for durability, easy repair, and recyclability. The throwaway culture of planned obsolescence vanishes, replaced by a truly circular economy. We would consume fewer resources because products would be used to their absolute maximum potential, refurbished and redeployed endlessly until their materials are reclaimed. In this scenario, we are freed from the anxiety of ownership. We live lighter, more flexible lives, defined not by what we have, but by what we do and experience. It is a compelling and elegant vision. but it hinges on an enormous degree of trust in the corporations that would act as the new landlords of our existence. And it demands that we begin to ask what we might lose when we are no longer owners, but merely temporary users in a world that belongs to someone else. This future, where even the chair you sit on could be tied to a monthly payment, did not spring into existence from nowhere. Its psychological foundations were carefully laid over the past 2 decades, not in the world of solid objects, but in the realm of ideas, music, and film. To understand why we might accept a subscription for our car, we must first look back at why we accepted it for our songs. For generations, music was a physical artifact. You owned a vinyl record, a cassette tape, or a compact disc. It was a tangible possession. You could hold it, read the liner notes, lend it to a friend, or sell it. Its value was yours to control. The digital revolution, beginning with services like Napster around 1999, threw this model into chaos. The ability to copy and share digital files infinitely was framed as a crisis of piracy for the music industry. And the solution that emerged was not a better way to sell ownership, but a new way to rent access. Spotify, founded in 2006, perfected this model. The proposition was intoxicating. For a small, recurring monthly fee, you could have access to nearly all the music ever recorded. The very notion of a personal, curated collection that you painstakingly built over years was rendered obsolete overnight. We traded the depth of a small, owned library for the vast, shallow ocean of a rented one. The same story unfolded with film. The ritual of going to Blockbuster or building a shelf of treasured DVDs gave way to the endless scroll of Netflix. Ownership was replaced by access, permanence by convenience. We were the first generation to be taught that possession of culture was less important than access to it, a profound psychological conditioning that served as the test ground for everything that was to follow. While consumers were getting accustomed to streaming their entertainment, a far more significant experiment was taking place in the corporate world. This was the rise of software as a service, or SaaS, and it proved just how incredibly profitable the subscription model could be. The landmark case was Adobe. For years, creative professionals bought Adobe Photoshop, or the entire creative suite, for a hefty one-time price, often over $1,000. They owned that software forever. Then in 2013, Adobe made a historic pivot. It announced it would no longer sell its software. Instead, professionals would have to subscribe to the Creative Cloud for a monthly or annual fee. The backlash from longtime users was immense, but Adobe held its ground. The results were a resounding validation of their strategy. Their revenue became stable and predictable. Wall Street rewarded them with a soaring stock valuation, and they effectively eliminated piracy in one move. Most importantly, they tethered their entire user base to a perpetual payment plan. Microsoft quickly followed suit, transforming its Office suite from a product you bought in a box into the subscription service, Microsoft 365. This move normalized the rental model for the most essential tools of modern work. It taught an entire global workforce that the software they depend on for their livelihood is not something they own or control. It is a service granted to them, contingent on uninterrupted payment. This corporate testbed was crucial because it proved the model's viability not just for discretionary entertainment, but for indispensable professional tools, a critical step towards applying the same logic to essential physical goods. The success of this grand transition hinged on a masterful exercise in psychological reframing. We didn't consciously choose to give up ownership. We were sold a story of liberation. The key marketing pillars of this new world were convenience, abundance, and minimalism. Convenience was the promise of a frictionless life. Your music, your movies, your files, all available on any device, anywhere, anytime, without the hassle of moving physical objects or transferring data. Abundance was the promise of infinite choice. Why be limited to the few dozen DVDs you own when you can have a library of thousands at your fingertips? This created a powerful illusion of wealth, the feeling of having everything, even if you technically owned nothing. And minimalism was the cultural narrative that tied it all together. The ownership of physical media was subtly repositioned as clutter, a burden from a bygone era. A clean, empty shelf, where a record collection used to be, was presented as a sign of enlightenment and modern living. We were encouraged to declutter our lives by shedding our physical possessions and embracing the elegant simplicity of the cloud. The desire for permanence and control, once seen as virtues of stability, were recast as anxieties we could be freed from. We were sold the idea that being a user was more liberating than being an owner. It was a brilliant campaign, not one orchestrated by a single entity, but an emergent cultural shift driven by powerful technological and economic incentives. This decades-long process of normalization has been a form of societal deep learning. We have been trained, click by click, subscription by subscription, to sever the link between utility and ownership. We learned this lesson first with our intangible goods, our music, our films, our software, because the transition was seamless and the benefits were immediate. The digital world was the perfect training ground. It taught us to be comfortable with the ephemeral, to value access over assets, and to accept the terms and conditions of a user agreement as the new deed of ownership. Now, this same logic is making the leap from the screen into the three-dimensional world of our homes, our garages, and our cities. The concept of furniture as a service, or mobility as a service, no longer sounds alien because we have spent the last 20 years renting our digital lives. The psychological groundwork has been laid. We have been thoroughly prepared for a future where we don't own the things we use, because in many ways, we've been living in a version of that future for years. The only difference is that the objects are now becoming as virtualized as the data used to be. The transition from renting digital files to renting physical objects is not just a shift in business models. It's a technological revolution, and its backbone has a simple name: the Internet of Things, or IoT. For decades, the objects in our lives were inert. A refrigerator's only job was to stay cold. A sofa's job was to be sat on. A car's job was to drive. They were silent, disconnected servants. But we are now in the midst of embedding connectivity and computation into every one of them. Your modern refrigerator is increasingly a networked computer that happens to keep food cold. Your television is a terminal for streaming services. And your car is a rolling data center with dozens of processors and a persistent connection to the cloud. This network of smart, connected objects is the fundamental enabler of the everything-as-a-service world. By embedding sensors, GPS modules, and wireless radios into a product, a manufacturer retains a permanent connection to it long after it leaves the factory. They can monitor its usage, diagnose problems remotely, and, most importantly, control its functionality. A simple firmware update can add a new feature or disable an old one. This constant stream of data and control is what transforms a static product into a dynamic service platform. It creates the technical means for a company to bill for usage by the hour, by the mile, or by the feature. Without the IoT, a subscription model for a physical object would be a logistical nightmare, relying on trust and manual checks. With IoT, it becomes an elegant, automated system of monitoring and enforcement. Every smart object becomes a digital tether, a permanent umbilical cord connecting the user back to the provider, ensuring the terms of the service agreement are continuously met. To grasp the true power of this new reality, we must understand a concept that has governed our digital lives for years: digital rights management, or DRM. Originally, DRM was the software used by companies like Apple to prevent you from illegally copying a song you purchased from iTunes. It was a digital lock. Now, this same logic is being applied to the physical world. Consider the now famous example of BMW's heated seat subscription, which first gained widespread attention in 2022. New BMW vehicles are built with the heating elements for the seats already installed. The hardware is there, in the car you possess. However, to activate that hardware, you must pay a monthly subscription fee. If you stop paying, BMW sends a remote signal to the car, and the software deactivates the heating function. This is DRM for the physical world. The car's capabilities are no longer defined by its physical engineering, but are managed by a remote server. This is a profound change. You are no longer buying a complete object with a fixed set of features. You are acquiring a physical platform whose functions can be switched on and off at will by the manufacturer. This model is expanding rapidly. Tesla has long used over-the-air updates to control features like battery range and acceleration. Agricultural equipment giant John Deere has faced immense backlash from farmers for using similar software locks to prevent them from repairing their own tractors, forcing them to use authorized and expensive service centers. This is the mechanism of control. It is the off switch that makes the subscription model for physical goods not just possible, but enforceable and highly profitable. It transforms ownership into a conditional permission to use. But creating millions of subscribable objects is only one part of the equation. The other is building the massive, global engine required to manage their life cycle. A world where most goods are rented requires an unprecedented level of logistical sophistication. Products must be delivered, sometimes assembled, then later collected, inspected, refurbished, and redeployed. This is where platforms like Amazon have, perhaps unintentionally, built the perfect infrastructure for the subscription future. For over 2 decades, Amazon has been relentlessly optimizing the process of moving goods from a warehouse to a front door with maximum speed and minimum cost. They have built a global network of fulfillment centers, a fleet of delivery vehicles, and a software backend that can manage billions of individual transactions. This system, designed for e-commerce sales, is perfectly suited to handle the reverse logistics of a subscription economy. When your sofa as a service subscription is up for renewal, and you decide to upgrade to a new model, that same logistics engine will manage the swap seamlessly. A delivery team will arrive with your new sofa and take the old one away to a refurbishment center where it will be cleaned, repaired, and prepared for the next subscriber. Companies like Furnish and Feather are already building businesses on this exact model for furniture rental, marketing it to a younger, more transient generation. What we are witnessing is the convergence of these three powerful technological forces. First, the ubiquitous connectivity of the Internet of Things, which turns every object into a manageable asset. Second, the enforcement mechanism of physical DRM, which allows companies to control the functionality of those objects remotely. And third, the hyper-efficient global logistics network that can handle the constant circulation of these goods. Together, they form a technological tripod that firmly supports a world in which you own very little. The smart objects are the endpoints, the DRM is the control system, and the logistics network is the circulatory system. This is not a far-off science fiction concept. The components are not in development. They are already deployed and are being scaled and refined every single day, quietly building the operational reality of a future where access is the new ownership. To truly understand why the subscription model is becoming the dominant force in our economy, we have to look at the world through the eyes of a corporate CEO or a Wall Street investor. From their perspective, the logic of recurring revenue is not just appealing, it's an evolutionary imperative. The traditional model of business, based on one-time sales, is fraught with uncertainty. A company might have a fantastic year selling a popular new product, but the next year, sales could plummet due to changing trends, new competition, or a slowing economy. This volatility is what keeps executives awake at night, and it's what financial markets punish with lower stock valuations. Investors crave predictability above all else. They want to see a clear, stable, and growing stream of income. A subscription business provides exactly that. A company like Netflix or Adobe knows with a high degree of certainty how much money it will make next month and next quarter, based on its current subscriber count and churn rate, the percentage of customers who cancel. This predictable cash flow is a golden metric. It allows for more accurate long-term planning, steadier investment in research and development, and, most importantly, it is rewarded with a much higher valuation on the stock market. $1 of predictable, recurring revenue is often valued 3 to 5 times higher by investors than $1 from a one-time sale. This powerful financial incentive creates immense pressure for every publicly traded company, from car manufacturers to appliance makers, to find a way to transform their customers from one-time buyers into long-term subscribers. It's the closest thing to a guaranteed future a business can get. The irresistible pull of this model means that any product that can be connected to the internet and turned into a service eventually will be. The second piece of the economic puzzle is what can be called the consumer cost illusion. For the individual, the subscription model is presented as a way to make expensive items more affordable. You may not have $50,000 to buy a new electric car, but you can likely afford a payment of $600 a month. You might not want to spend $3,000 on a high-end exercise bike, but $100 a month for the bike and its connected classes feels manageable. This atomization of cost lowers the barrier to entry and makes premium products accessible to a wider audience. However, this convenience often masks a much higher total cost over a lifetime. Let's consider a simple example: a high-quality sofa. A well-made sofa purchased for $2,000 might last for 20 years. Now, consider a sofa-as-a-service subscription for $50 a month. After just over 3 years, you will have paid the full purchase price of the sofa, yet you own nothing. If you keep that subscription for the full 20-year lifespan of a purchased sofa, you will have spent $12,000, 6 times the original cost, and will be left with nothing at the end. The low monthly fee feels like a small, harmless transaction, but compounded over years and across dozens of different products, it amounts to a substantial and permanent drain on household wealth. We are trading the potential for long-term equity for the benefit of short-term cash flow, a trade that overwhelmingly benefits the provider of the service. This leads to the third, and perhaps most profound, economic consequence: the systematic death of the second-hand market. For centuries, the ability to resell durable goods has been a crucial part of the economy and a way for individuals to recoup value from their possessions. When you buy a car, you know you can sell it in a few years and use that money towards a new one. Your old tools, your children's outgrown bicycles, your previous generation smartphone, all of these things have a secondary life and a residual value. This peer-to-peer marketplace is a massive, decentralized form of wealth redistribution. The subscription model completely dismantles this. When you are merely renting a product, you have nothing to sell when you're done with it. The product simply goes back to the manufacturer. All the residual value that would have been distributed among millions of individuals in a second-hand market is now entirely recaptured and concentrated in the hands of the original company. They control the refurbishment process and can then resubscribe the same product to another user, extracting value from it over and over again. This creates a closed-loop system where value never truly escapes the corporation's orbit. It's a perfectly efficient model for corporate value extraction, but it simultaneously eliminates a vital economic ladder for individuals and small businesses who thrive on repairing and reselling used goods. Think of the independent used car dealership, the local electronics repair shop, the thrift store. The economic ecosystem that supports them is fundamentally threatened in a world where manufacturers retain permanent ownership of their products. This isn't just about losing the ability to find a bargain on a used item. It's about a fundamental restructuring of our economy, shifting it from a web of distributed owners to a centralized system of providers and users. The economic logic is a powerful trinity. For corporations, it offers the promise of predictable, highly valued revenue. For consumers, it presents the illusion of affordability and the convenience of a frictionless lifestyle. And for the economy as a whole, it represents a radical reconcentration of value, pulling it away from the edges of the network, the individual owners, and hoarding it at the center. This is the engine driving us toward 2040, a silent, powerful current that is reshaping our financial lives, one monthly payment at a time. As the economic logic of subscriptions reshapes our markets, it simultaneously begins to rewire the very fabric of our social lives and cultural values. When we transition from a society of owners to a society of users, the consequences extend far beyond our bank accounts. Perhaps the most profound social implication is the quiet erosion of inheritance. For millennia, one of the primary ways families built and transferred wealth across generations was through the passing down of physical assets. This could be as grand as a family home or a piece of land, or as humble as a set of well-made tools, a quality piece of furniture, a reliable car, or even a collection of treasured books or records. These objects were more than just their material value. They were carriers of memory, history, and a sense of continuity. They were the tangible links in the chain connecting one generation to the next. In a future where these core assets are subscribed to rather than owned, this entire tradition dissolves. How do you pass down a mobility as a service subscription to your child? What happens to the family's smart furniture when the primary account holder is no longer there? The concept becomes meaningless. The wealth, the utility, and the history embodied in those objects simply revert back to the corporation. Inheritance is transformed from a private, familial act into a final transaction with a service provider. This represents a fundamental break in how intergenerational stability is created, potentially locking future generations out of the foundational assets that their parents and grandparents used to build a life. It severs the roots of the family tree from the material soil that once nourished it. Beyond the family, this shift fosters a broader culture of transience and detachment. The relationship we have with an object we own is fundamentally different from one we merely use. Ownership often cultivates a sense of responsibility and stewardship. You take care of your car, you repair your home, you maintain your tools because they are yours. They are an extension of your identity and an investment in your future. This sense of stewardship extends to our communities. Home ownership, for all its complexities, has been statistically linked to higher rates of civic engagement, local investment, and community stability. When you own a piece of your neighborhood, you are more likely to care about its parks, its schools, and its local governance. A subscription lifestyle, by its very design, encourages a more transient mentality. If your apartment, your furniture, and your transportation are all part of a flexible service package, the friction of moving from one city to another is dramatically reduced. This might be sold as a form of liberation, the freedom to follow opportunity wherever it leads. But it can also weaken the ties that bind us to a place and to each other. When a community is primarily composed of temporary users rather than long-term stakeholders, the incentive to invest time and energy into building local bonds and institutions diminishes. We risk becoming tourists in our own lives, perpetually passing through spaces that are managed by distant corporations with little reason to plant deep roots. The very feeling of home as a place of permanence and belonging could be replaced by a series of well-managed but ultimately impersonal user experiences. This emerging culture creates a stark generational divide, a clash of values rooted in vastly different economic realities. For older generations, particularly the baby boomers and Gen X, ownership was a central pillar of adulthood and a primary marker of success. The narrative was clear. You work hard, you save, and you buy a home, a car, and other durable assets. This was the path to security and a respectable life. Their values were shaped in an analog world where possession was tangible and permanent. For younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, this narrative has already broken down. They have come of age in an era of economic precarity, stagnant wages, and skyrocketing asset prices, making traditional ownership, especially of housing, feel like an impossible dream. Simultaneously, they are digital natives who grew up with the frictionless convenience of Spotify and Netflix. For them, access and flexibility are not just marketing terms. They are genuine survival strategies in an unstable world. They are often more comfortable with the minimalist, experience-oriented lifestyle that the subscription economy promotes. This is not a simple case of one generation being wiser than the other. It is a reflection of a world that has fundamentally changed. The younger generation's embrace of the user model is both a pragmatic adaptation to their economic circumstances and a result of the cultural conditioning they have been immersed in since birth. Yet, this raises a critical question. Are we choosing this future freely? Or are we being forced into it by an economic system that has made the alternative, a life of ownership, increasingly unattainable for the majority? The danger is that what begins as a choice for some, the urban professional who values the flexibility of a furniture subscription, becomes a necessity for all, as the option to purchase durable, repairable, ownable goods slowly disappears from the market. We are navigating a transition between two worlds, defined by two different relationships to the material. One is a world of permanence, stewardship, and inherited stability. The other is a world of flexibility, convenience, and perpetual access. The social landscape of 2040 will be profoundly shaped by which of these worlds becomes the dominant reality, and what is lost and perhaps gained in the transition between them. The shift towards a subscription-based economy is often presented not just as an economic evolution, but as an environmental imperative. The argument for this best-case scenario is both elegant and compelling, revolving around the concept of a true circular economy. In our current model of ownership, a manufacturer's responsibility for a product typically ends at the point of sale. Their primary incentive is to sell as many new units as possible, which has given rise to the culture of planned obsolescence, designing products to break down or become undesirable after a few years to fuel the next cycle of consumption. This linear take-make-waste model has led to overflowing landfills and a voracious, unsustainable appetite for raw materials. The subscription model, in theory, completely inverts this incentive structure. When a company like Philips no longer sells you a light bulb, but sells you lighting as a service, as they are already doing for large commercial clients like Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, they retain ownership of the bulbs and fixtures. Suddenly, their financial incentive is to make that equipment last as long as possible, be as energy efficient as possible, and be as easy as possible to repair and upgrade. Durability, reliability, and recyclability are no longer just marketing buzzwords. They become core drivers of profitability. Every repair they have to make and every unit they have to replace eats into their profit margin. In this ideal vision, the world is filled with incredibly well-engineered products designed for longevity. When your subscribed washing machine finally reaches the end of its life after decades of service, the company that owns it is responsible for its disposal. They are incentivized to design it from the start with modular components that can be easily swapped out and materials that can be efficiently recovered and repurposed into the next generation of machines. This creates a closed-loop system, a circular economy where waste is designed out of the system and the life cycle of every material is maximized. It's a powerful and attractive vision of a more sustainable future, a world where our consumption is no longer synonymous with depletion. However, this utopian environmental promise is shadowed by a much more complex and potentially perilous reality: the immense and often invisible environmental cost of the logistics required to make it all work. A seamless, as-a-service world is a world in constant motion. Think about the sheer volume of transportation required. Every time a subscriber wants to upgrade their phone, swap their furniture, or try a new piece of fitness equipment, a delivery truck is dispatched. The old item must then be transported back to a centralized refurbishment center, which could be hundreds of miles away. These centers themselves are massive industrial operations, consuming significant energy and resources to clean, repair, and repackage goods for their next user. This constant churn of delivery, return, and refurbishment generates a massive carbon footprint from a global fleet of vans, trucks, ships, and planes. A study from the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics highlighted that the last mile of delivery is the most expensive and carbon-intensive part of the supply chain. A subscription economy dramatically increases the traffic in this last mile. While we might reduce the waste going into landfills, we could dramatically increase the carbon emissions pouring into the atmosphere. Furthermore, the packaging required to protect these items in transit, the cardboard, plastic foam, and wrapping, becomes a new, persistent stream of waste. The environmental promise of the circular economy could be undone by the hidden ecological cost of the constant logistical dance it demands. This leads to a deeper, more geopolitical environmental concern. As ownership of most major manufactured goods becomes concentrated in the hands of a few global corporations, so too does the control over the raw materials from which those goods are made. In a traditional economy, the resources embedded in the millions of cars, washing machines, and electronics sitting in people's homes are widely distributed. In a subscription economy, the corporations that own these fleets of products also effectively control a massive mobile reserve of strategic materials: lithium, cobalt, copper, rare earth elements. This creates a new nexus of power. These companies would not just be service providers. They would become de facto resource banks, managing vast quantities of the world's most critical materials. This centralization of resource control could create new geopolitical pressure points and vulnerabilities. A trade dispute or political tension could lead a company or the nation it is based in to restrict the flow of these refurbished goods or the raw materials reclaimed from them, creating shortages and dependencies that mirror the current geopolitics of oil and gas. For example, if a handful of corporations control the entire life cycle of electric vehicle batteries, they also control one of the world's most significant stockpiles of lithium and cobalt. Their decisions about where and how to redeploy or recycle those materials could have profound impacts on global markets and international relations. We are therefore faced with a profound environmental paradox. The subscription model offers a beautiful, logical solution to the problem of waste and disposability. Yet, its operational reality could create a new set of environmental crises fueled by hyperactive logistics and a dangerous concentration of resource power. The truly sustainable future likely lies not in a complete shift to this model, but in finding a delicate balance, one that leverages the incentives of the circular economy without succumbing to the immense environmental footprint of a world where everything is perpetually in transit. Beyond the economic and environmental the architecture of a subscription-based society raises a set of profound ethical questions about power, dependence, and the very nature of human autonomy. The most immediate and visceral of these is the power of the off switch. When every essential object in your life is a service you subscribe to, you are perpetually tethered to the provider of that service. This tether is not just a billing relationship, it is a mechanism of absolute control. We've already seen this in the digital realm, where a platform like Google or Facebook can deplatform a user, effectively erasing their digital existence for a violation of their ever-changing terms of service. Now, imagine that same power applied to the physical world. What happens when a missed payment, a billing error, or an alleged terms of service violation doesn't just cut off your access to a streaming service, but remotely disables your car while you're on your way to a job interview? What are the consequences when your smart home, subscribed to as a service, has its heating and lighting deactivated in the middle of winter? Or when the very furniture in your apartment is locked in an unusable state because of a dispute with the provider? This is no longer a matter of inconvenience. It is a question of fundamental safety and security. The power of the remote off switch creates a state of radical dependence, a fragile existence where the basic functionalities of daily life are contingent upon the perfect, uninterrupted compliance with a corporate entity's rules. This grants a handful of global companies a level of coercive power over individuals that was previously reserved for governments. It introduces a new and terrifying dimension of precarity into everyday life, where a single algorithmically flagged mistake could result in an immediate and catastrophic disruption of one's ability to function in society. The second ethical dimension is the transformation of private life into a perpetual stream of corporate surveillance. The very technology that enables the subscription model, the Internet of Things, is also the most powerful mass surveillance network ever created. In this model, the product you are using is no longer the real product. You are the product, and your behavior is the commodity being sold. Every interaction with a subscribed object becomes a data point. Your smart bed, provided by Sleep as a Service, tracks your sleep patterns, your heart rate, and even how often you toss and turn. Your subscribed refrigerator knows what you eat, when you eat it, and what you're running low on. Your mobility as a service car logs every trip you take, your average speed, your braking habits, and your most frequent destinations. This data is ostensibly collected to improve the user experience, but it is also an asset of immense value. It can be used for hyper-targeted advertising, sold to insurance, companies to calculate your risk premiums, or used by credit agencies to determine your financial reliability. The home, once considered a sanctuary of privacy, becomes a transparent data-generating hub for the corporations that furnish and operate it. We are trading privacy for convenience on an unprecedented scale, allowing the intimate details of our lives to be monitored, analyzed, and monetized in perpetuity. This goes far beyond the data we currently share on social media. It is the surveillance of our physical being, our movements, our health, and our most private habits within the supposed sanctity of our own homes. This constant monitoring and the ever-present threat of the off switch lead to the deepest ethical question. Can true autonomy, the capacity for free and independent action, exist in a state of total dependency on corporate service providers? Freedom is not just about having choices. It's about having the power to make those choices without fear of coercion. When the ability to travel, to work, to live in a warm and well-lit home, and even to sit on your own sofa is contingent upon the grace of a remote administrator and your perfect adherence to their rules, your sphere of autonomous action shrinks dramatically. This creates a powerful chilling effect, Would you be willing to publicly criticize a company that has the power to remotely disable your car? Would you join a protest against a corporation that controls your home's essential functions? The risk of being deplatformed from physical life itself could become a powerful tool for enforcing social and political compliance, silencing dissent not through overt censorship, but through the subtle, ever-present threat of digital exile. The architecture of dependence is not necessarily built with malicious intent. It is the logical, profit-maximizing outcome of connecting every object to a service model. But its consequences for human freedom are staggering. It proposes a future where our relationship with the world is no longer one of direct ownership and control, but one of a licensed user, perpetually subject to the terms and conditions of a contract we had no part in writing. It is a shift from the robust freedom of the owner to the fragile, conditional liberty of the tenant. A tenant not just in our homes, but in the very fabric of our lives. We are at risk of building a perfectly convenient, seamlessly integrated world that is also a gilded cage. The economic and ethical architecture of a subscription society inevitably leads to a new and stark form of social stratification. As the concept of ownership recedes from the grasp of the average person, we are likely to see the emergence of a clear, two-tiered economic system, a structure that mirrors historical class divides, but is built on a uniquely modern foundation. On one side, there will be the owners. This will be a relatively small, global class of individuals, corporations, and investment funds that hold the titles to the vast majority of physical assets. They will own the server farms that run the cloud, the automated factories that produce the goods, the logistics networks that deliver them, and the fleets of smart objects, the cars, homes, appliances, and furniture that are leased out to the general population. Their wealth will not come from producing and selling things, but from managing and renting out the systems that underpin modern life. This is the class that builds and holds the equity, benefiting from the long-term appreciation of these essential assets. On the other side will be the users. This will be the vast majority of the global population. They will not build wealth through the accumulation of assets, but will instead manage a complex portfolio of monthly subscription payments for access to the necessities of life. Their economic reality will be defined not by a balance sheet of assets and liabilities, but by the relationship between their monthly income and their recurring monthly expenses. While their lifestyle may be comfortable and convenient, filled with the latest technology and services, their economic position will be fundamentally precarious. They will be perpetually 1 or 2 lost paychecks away from having their essential services, and thus their entire way of life deactivated. This divide is not simply about the rich and the poor. It's a more fundamental division between those who own the means of production and living, and those who merely rent access to it. This new class structure presents a formidable barrier to upward economic mobility. For much of the 20th century, the primary vehicle for the middle class to build wealth was through asset ownership, most notably home ownership. A family would buy a house, and over 30 years of mortgage payments, they would convert their monthly housing expense into equity. That equity could then be used to fund their retirement, start a business, or help their children with their own education or first home. It was a slow but steady process of wealth accumulation. The subscription model systematically blocks this pathway. When you spend 30 years paying for housing as a service, at the end of that period, your net worth is exactly the same as it was on day one. You have accumulated zero equity. The same is true for your car, your tools, and every other major durable good. The money that would have once been slowly converted into personal assets is instead permanently channeled upwards to the owner class. This system risks creating a permanent renter class, where generations are born into a system of use without ownership, effectively locked out of the most powerful wealth-building mechanism in modern history. The cycle of intergenerational wealth transfer is broken, and the gap between the owners and the users widens with each passing year, solidifying into a seemingly inescapable economic reality. Some analysts have begun to use a powerful, if unsettling, historical parallel to describe this potential future: corporate feudalism. In the feudal system of the Middle Ages, society was structured around the relationship between lords and serfs. The lords owned the land, the most critical asset of the era. The serfs did not own land. They were granted the right to live on it and work it in exchange for a share of their labor and a pledge of loyalty. They had access to the means of survival, but they did not have ownership or control. They were fundamentally dependent on the goodwill of their lord. The parallel to the subscription economy is striking. The global corporations become the new lords, owning the essential assets of the digital and physical age, the platforms, the networks, and the physical goods. The users become the new serfs, granted access to these assets in exchange for a recurring fee, their labor, and their adherence to the terms of service, their loyalty. While the modern serf enjoys a level of material comfort and technological wonder unimaginable to their historical counterpart, their structural economic position is eerily similar. They are tenants in a system they cannot own, dependent on a distant, powerful entity for their continued access to the necessities of life. This is not to suggest a return to medieval hardship, but to use a historical lens to understand the profound shift in power dynamics. It is a transition from a society of freeholders, with the rights and autonomy that come with ownership, to a society of dependents whose lives are managed and controlled by the owners of the systems they rely on. This new class divide, therefore, is not just an economic outcome. It's a reordering of society itself, creating a future where the lines between the asset holders and the asset renters are drawn ever more sharply, with profound implications for social cohesion, equality, and the very meaning of a free and prosperous life. As the subscription model solidifies in the economic centers of the world, its global rollout will not be uniform. The transition to life as a service will manifest differently across developed and developing nations, creating a new form of global inequality, a subscription gap. In wealthy nations like those in North America, Western Europe, and parts of Asia, the shift is likely to be framed and experienced as a luxury of convenience. For affluent urban populations, giving up the burden of ownership for the seamless, minimalist lifestyle offered by subscription services will be a status symbol, a conscious choice to prioritize experience over accumulation. They will trade their owned cars for premium mobility services and their purchased furniture for curated designer rental packages. For the middle and working classes in these same countries, however, it will be less of a choice and more of an economic necessity, as the rising cost of traditional ownership pushes them towards rental models as the only affordable option. The crucial point, however, is that these societies are transitioning from a well-established culture of widespread ownership. The infrastructure of property rights, consumer protection laws, and the very idea of the individual as an owner are deeply embedded. In stark contrast, many developing nations are at a completely different stage. For billions of people in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, the 21st century was supposed to be the era where they finally achieved the dream of a property-owning middle class. The subscription model, exported by global tech giants, could fundamentally short-circuit this process. Instead of moving from having no assets to owning assets, a huge portion of the emerging global middle class might skip the ownership phase entirely, moving directly from a pre-industrial economy to a post-ownership service-based one. This could prevent the creation of generational wealth and economic stability in these regions, just as it was beginning to take root, locking them into a permanent dependency on foreign corporations for their most basic goods and services. However, this global rollout will not be without resistance. Many parts of the world have strong, long-standing traditions of repair, reuse, and informal local economies that are fundamentally at odds with the closed-loop, corporate-controlled subscription model. In many African and South Asian cities, for example, there are vibrant marketplaces and skilled artisans dedicated to repairing electronics, fixing vehicles, and reupholstering furniture. These informal economies are bastions of ownership and ingenuity, built on the principle that an object's life can be extended indefinitely through clever repair and modification. These cultures of maintenance could become powerful centers of resistance to a model that seeks to make repair illegal or impossible. We might see the rise of ownership havens, regions, or communities that actively reject the subscription model and cultivate local ecosystems of making, selling, and repairing durable goods. These could become modern-day free towns, operating on principles of open-source hardware and the right to repair, attracting those who prioritize autonomy over the convenience of the managed service world. The informal sector, often viewed as a sign of underdevelopment, could ironically become a sophisticated defense mechanism against corporate feudalism. This tension between the global subscription model and local ownership cultures will inevitably lead to a significant divergence in regulatory approaches around the world. We are likely to see three major blocks emerge, each with a different philosophy. The European Union, with its strong tradition of consumer rights and data privacy embodied in regulations like the GDPR, will likely take a protectionist stance. They will probably introduce legislation that guarantees a consumer's right to own, limits the power of remote deactivation, mandates data portability, and enforces strong protections against predatory pricing. The EU's approach will be to try and tame the subscription model, allowing it to exist, but heavily regulating it to protect the autonomy and rights of the individual citizen. The United States, with its more libertarian, corporate-friendly legal tradition, will likely take a different path. The focus will be on freedom of contract and corporate innovation. Barring a major consumer backlash, U.S. law will likely favor the rights of the service providers, upholding the enforceability of lengthy and complex terms of service agreements. The American model will likely be the one that most closely resembles the pure, uninhibited vision of the subscription economy, prioritizing market efficiency and corporate freedom over individual consumer protection. Finally, there is the Chinese model. China will almost certainly embrace the technological infrastructure of the subscription economy, as the data collection and social control mechanisms it offers are perfectly aligned with the goals of a centralized state. However, the ultimate control will not lie with the corporations themselves, but with the government. The state will be the final arbiter, using the off switch not just for commercial reasons, but as a tool of social and political management, fully integrated with its social credit system. In China, the subscription model will likely become a powerful arm of the state, a way to enforce compliance on an unprecedented scale. This global divergence will create a complex and fragmented world. Where you live will increasingly determine your fundamental relationship with the material world, whether you are a protected consumer, a free market user, or a state-managed subscriber. The subscription gap will not just be economic, but also philosophical, reflecting deep-seated cultural and political differences in the balance of power between the individual, the corporation, and the state. Faced with a future that seems to be converging on a universal rental model, it's crucial to understand that this path is not predetermined. Resistance to this trend is already emerging, not as a single, organized movement, but as a series of strategies and choices that together form a powerful counter-narrative. The first and most direct strategy is an ownership revival, a conscious consumer movement to seek out and support businesses that explicitly reject the subscription model. This involves a deliberate choice to vote with our wallets for companies that guarantee full, unencumbered ownership and control to the buyer. We are already seeing the green shoots of this movement. In the software world, companies like Affinity have gained a loyal following by positioning themselves as a direct alternative to Adobe's Creative Cloud, selling their professional-grade photo and design software for a one-time fee. They have built their entire brand identity around the promise of no subscription. This same ethos can and will be applied to physical goods. Imagine appliance manufacturers who market their washing machines and refrigerators with a 25-year ownership guarantee, promising not only durability, but also that the machine will never be connected to the internet against your will, and that its core functions will never be contingent on a service agreement. Car companies could emerge that cater to a niche but passionate market of buyers who want a vehicle free from over-the-air software locks and subscription-based features. These sell-only businesses would become the modern equivalent of the organic food movement, a smaller, more values-driven segment of the market that slowly begins to influence the mainstream by proving the commercial viability of an alternative. Supporting them is a direct investment in a future where ownership remains a viable choice. At the heart of this ownership revival is the growing and critically important right to repair movement. This is a global legislative battle to enshrine in law the right of individuals and independent shops to fix the products they possess. For years, manufacturers have used a variety of tactics to monopolize repair, from using proprietary screws and gluing components together, to most effectively using software locks that prevent unauthorized parts from functioning. The right to repair movement is a direct counterattack on this closed-loop system. It demands that manufacturers make repair manuals, diagnostic tools, and spare parts available to everyone, not just their authorized service centers. This is a fundamental challenge to the subscription model's logic. If a product can be repaired and maintained by its user indefinitely. Its value can be extended far beyond the manufacturer's control, undermining their ability to push users onto a new subscription or lease. Landmark legislation, like the rules passed in several U.S. states and the frameworks being developed by the European Union, are chipping away at the corporate monopoly on repair. Every victory for this movement is a victory for ownership. It reasserts the idea that when you buy something, you own all of it, including the right to understand, modify, and fix it. It is the legal and practical foundation upon which a durable culture of ownership can be rebuilt. Finally, the ownership revival has a deeply personal dimension. It involves a conscious, individual strategy to shift our own consumption patterns away from novelty and towards longevity. This means actively choosing to invest in timeless, durable goods over products that are trendy but disposable or loaded with digital features that can be remotely controlled. It's the decision to buy a well-made mechanical watch instead of a smartwatch that will be obsolete in 3 years. It's choosing to purchase solid wood furniture from a local artisan instead of flat-pack furniture designed to last for a single move. It's learning basic maintenance and repair skills, whether for clothing, electronics, or household items, to extend the life of the things we already own. This is a philosophy of buy it for life. It requires more upfront investment and a change in mindset, moving away from the dopamine hit of constant novelty and towards the quiet satisfaction of stewardship. It's a form of personal resistance that, when practiced by millions, creates a powerful market signal. It starves the ecosystem of disposability and planned obsolescence and nourishes the ecosystem of quality and permanence. This strategy is not about a nostalgic return to the past or a rejection of technology. It is about being intentional. It is about choosing technologies that empower the user rather than tether them. It is about recognizing that true wealth is not just about financial assets, but about autonomy, resilience, and control over the physical world we inhabit. The ownership revival is the understanding that every purchase is a political act, a vote cast for the kind of economic and social world we wish to build. It is the quiet, decentralized, but powerful assertion that the future is not for rent. Beyond individual consumer choices, a second powerful strategy for securing an autonomous future lies in building community-based alternatives to corporate-controlled services. This approach recognizes that not everyone can afford to own every item they need, but it reframes the solution not as individual rental from a global corporation, but as collective access and shared ownership within a local community. A key pillar of this strategy is the rise of the library of things. This is a beautifully simple and increasingly popular concept. Just like a traditional library lends books, a library of things lends out a vast array of useful household items, power drills, sewing machines, carpet cleaners, camping equipment, kitchen appliances, and even specialized tools for electronics repair. These institutions, often run by local governments or nonprofit community groups, provide affordable access to high-quality goods for a small membership fee, or even for free. The model is a direct challenge to the corporate subscription economy. It decouples access from corporate control and profit motive. When you borrow a drill from a library of things, there are no hidden terms of service, no data being collected on your usage, and no remote off switch. The institution's goal is not to maximize revenue, but to maximize community benefit and resource sharing. It fosters a culture of sufficiency, teaching people that they don't need to individually own 1,000 different items that they might only use once or twice a year. This model is not only economically empowering for individuals, but it is also environmentally potent, dramatically reducing the overall consumption and waste of a community by encouraging the shared use of durable goods. It is a tangible, scalable alternative that builds local resilience and social capital. A deeper and more integrated version of this community-centric approach can be found in the expansion of cooperative ownership models. Cooperatives, or co-ops, are businesses or organizations that are owned and controlled by their members, rather than by outside investors. This democratic structure can be applied to almost any asset. We are already familiar with housing cooperatives, where residents collectively own and manage their entire apartment building, giving them control over their living situation in a way that traditional renting does not. But this model can be extended much further. Imagine a neighborhood mobility co-op that collectively owns and maintains a fleet of electric cars, e-bikes, and cargo bikes for its members. The members pay a fee that covers the actual costs of maintenance, insurance, and replacement, but there is no profit being extracted by a distant corporation. Decisions about what vehicles to buy, what the usage rules are, and how to invest any surplus funds are made democratically by the users themselves. We could see community energy co-ops that own and manage local solar and wind installations, tool co-ops that operate shared workshops and makerspaces, and even food co-ops that invest in shared commercial kitchens. This model replaces the hierarchical provider-user relationship of the corporate subscription model with a horizontal network of owner members. It is a powerful way to pool resources and achieve the benefits of access and shared use without sacrificing ownership and control. The technological foundation for this community-centric future is being built by the open-source hardware movement. While open-source software has been a powerful force for decades, the idea of applying the same principles to physical objects is now gaining significant traction. Open-source hardware means that the design specifications for a product, the blueprints, the schematics, the bill of materials, are made publicly available for anyone to study, modify, and build upon. This fundamentally breaks the corporate monopoly on manufacturing. Projects like Precious Plastic provide open-source designs for a series of machines that allow a small community workshop to recycle plastic waste into new, useful products. The Open-Source Ecology Project is developing the Global Village Construction Set, a library of 50 essential industrial machines, from tractors to 3D printers, that can be built from scratch at a fraction of the cost of commercial equivalents. This movement empowers communities to become producers, not just consumers. It means that if a corporation decides to stop supporting a product or refuses to sell spare parts, a local community with the right skills and tools can manufacture its own. It is the ultimate guarantee against planned obsolescence and corporate control. It creates a world where technology is a shared body of knowledge rather than a proprietary secret, fostering innovation and resilience at the grassroots level. Together, these three elements, the library of things, cooperative ownership, and open-source hardware, form the building blocks of a robust community alternative. They offer a future that is not a retreat into an anti-technology past, nor an embrace of total corporate dependency. It is a third way, a technologically advanced, interconnected society where the ownership and control of essential assets are distributed, democratized, and rooted in the local community. This is a future where the platform is not owned by a Silicon Valley giant, but by the people who use it, creating a more equitable, resilient, and fundamentally more autonomous way of life. To navigate the future, we must be able to imagine its various possibilities, not just as warnings, but as genuine potential paths. Let's first explore the most optimistic trajectory, the best-case scenario, where the transition to a subscription-based economy leads not to a dystopia, but to a kind of seamless, sustainable utopia. In this version of 2040, the core promise of the circular economy has been fully realized. The world's largest manufacturers, having retained ownership of their products, have engaged in a virtuous cycle of innovation focused on extreme durability and efficiency. Planned obsolescence is a forgotten concept, a wasteful relic of the 20th century. Products are designed with a 100-year life cycle in mind, built from modular, easily repairable components. Waste has been nearly eliminated. When your subscribed smart appliance needs a new part, a technician is dispatched to swap the module in minutes. The old module is returned to the factory, where its materials are 100% recovered and fed back into the production line. Landfills have stopped growing, and in many places are being mined for the valuable resources buried there by previous, less enlightened generations. In this world, the average person is freed from the immense debt and financial anxiety traditionally associated with acquiring major assets. Young people are not burdened with crippling mortgages or car loans. Instead, they have access to high-quality housing, transportation, and goods through flexible and affordable service plans. This frees up their income for investment in education, experiences, and personal well-being. The culture has successfully shifted from valuing the accumulation of material possessions to valuing personal growth, community engagement, and creativity. People define their success not by the size of their house, but by the richness of their lives. The constant pressure to keep up with the Joneses by buying the latest model has evaporated, replaced by the quiet confidence of knowing you always have access to the best available tool for the job, precisely when you need it. Critically, this utopian scenario is not the result of blind trust in corporate benevolence. It is built upon a foundation of extremely robust consumer protection and data privacy laws, likely pioneered by a regulatory bloc like the European Union and eventually adopted globally. In this future, governments have stepped in to act as powerful referees. Subscription contracts are standardized and written in plain language. Price gouging is illegal, and algorithms that set prices based on personal data are heavily audited for fairness. A universal user's bill of rights guarantees that no one can be disconnected from essential services like housing or mobility without due process. Data ownership is enshrined as a fundamental right. Individuals have full control over the data generated by their use of subscribed products and can even choose to be paid for it if they wish to share it. The power of the remote off switch is strictly limited to cases of theft or genuine emergency, never to be used as a tool for commercial coercion. This strong regulatory framework creates a balanced ecosystem. Corporations can still profit from the efficiency of the service model, but their power is held in check by the rights of the citizen user. The system is designed to serve humanity, not the other way around. Society has managed to capture the immense benefits of the subscription model. its efficiency, its sustainability, its convenience, while successfully mitigating its inherent risks to autonomy and privacy. The relationship between provider and user is one of partnership rather than dependency. In this seamless utopia, our relationship with the material world is lighter and more intelligent. Our homes are not cluttered with objects we rarely use. Our cities are quieter and less polluted, as shared autonomous electric vehicle fleets have replaced most private car ownership. Access to everything, from a gourmet kitchen for a special occasion to a high-powered computer for a creative project, is available on demand. This fosters a more dynamic and equitable society. A person's potential is no longer limited by the assets they or their family happen to own. A child from a low-income background has access to the same educational tools, the same quality of housing, and the same safe transportation as a child from a wealthy family. The focus on experience also leads to a renaissance in arts, culture, and leisure. With less time and money spent on maintaining and managing possessions, people have more resources to devote to hobbies, travel, and community activities. It is a world that has successfully traded the burden of ownership for the freedom of access, creating a society that is not only more sustainable and efficient, but also potentially more equitable and fulfilled. This is the grand promise of the subscription economy, a future where technology and a new economic model combine to solve some of our oldest problems, freeing us to live smarter, lighter, and more meaningful lives. It is a possible future, but one that requires immense foresight, active citizenship, and a steadfast commitment to ensuring that these new systems are designed to serve human values above all else. Now, we must turn our gaze to the opposite pole, to the darkest potential future that could emerge from these same seeds of change. This is the scenario of the digital dystopia, a world where the logic of the subscription economy has been followed to its conclusion without the guardrails of robust regulation or a conscious public resistance. In this version of 2040, society is composed of a vast global class of perpetual renters who possess virtually zero economic leverage. The dream of ownership is a distant historical memory. Every facet of daily life, from the apartment you live in to the clothes you wear, is provided as a service by a handful of monolithic global corporations. These companies, having consolidated their power, form a new kind of oligarchy, controlling the essential infrastructure of modern civilization. The convenience that was once a selling point has become an iron cage. Life is seamless, but it is also completely managed, monitored, and subject to the whims of a distant corporate entity. The defining characteristic of this world is precariousness by design. Your continued access to a functional life is contingent on your flawless performance as a consumer and citizen. A single missed payment, perhaps due to a temporary job loss or a medical emergency, triggers an immediate and automated cascade of consequences. Your car won't start. Your apartment door won't unlock. Your smart appliances cease to function. The lights in your home dim to a bare minimum. This is not a punitive measure that requires human intervention. It is simply the automated enforcement of a service agreement. Your life can be effectively switched off, plunging you into a state of immediate crisis. This creates a society gripped by a low-level, constant anxiety. People live in fear of making a mistake, of falling behind, of having their digital key to society revoked. The relationship between the individual and the corporation is not one of a customer and a business, but of a serf and a lord. The corporation provides for your needs, but in return, it demands absolute compliance. There is no appeals process, no human to plead your case to, only the cold, unforgiving logic of the algorithm that manages your account. In this digital dystopia, the most terrifying power is not overt oppression, but the threat of a digital lockout. This becomes the ultimate tool for enforcing social and political conformity. The terms of service agreements, which no one reads, have been expanded to include vague clauses about community standards and acceptable behavior. Expressing a dissenting political opinion on social media, associating with known activists, or even just being algorithmically flagged as a destabilizing influence could be classified as a violation of these terms. The consequence is not arrest or imprisonment in the traditional sense, which is messy and creates martyrs. The consequence is simply to be deplatformed from life itself. Your subscriptions are canceled. Your access is revoked. You become a digital ghost, unable to participate in a society that is completely dependent on these network services. This creates a powerful chilling effect that extinguishes dissent before it can even begin. People self-censor, avoiding any topic or activity that could jeopardize their standing as a user in good standing. Activism, protest, and genuine political debate wither away, not because they are illegal, but because they are simply too risky. The price of free speech is to be cast out into the unserviced margins of the world. Privacy is an archaic concept. Every moment is a data point, captured and analyzed to optimize the system. Your conversations at home are monitored by smart speakers to anticipate your needs. Your biometrics are tracked by your subscribed mattress and wearable devices to assess your health and productivity. This data is not just used for marketing. It is used to calculate your user score, a comprehensive metric of your value and reliability as a subscriber. A low score, resulting from poor health habits, inefficient consumption patterns, or a suboptimal social network, leads to higher subscription fees and restricted access to premium services. It is a society of total transparency, but the visibility flows in only one direction, from the individual to the corporation. In this world, there is no escape. The elimination of ownership and the death of the second-hand market mean there are no alternatives. You cannot buy a used, non-networked car because they no longer exist. You cannot repair your own devices because they are protected by unbreakable software locks. The informal economies of repair and reuse have been systematically dismantled. There is only one system, and your only choice is to participate on its terms or be excluded entirely. This is a future that has achieved a kind of perfect, frictionless totalitarianism, one that rules not through force, but through the management of convenience and the threat of exclusion. It is a comfortable prison, a dystopia that may not even feel like one to those born into it, for they have never known the autonomy, the privacy, or the resilience that comes with genuine ownership. Between the two extremes of a seamless utopia and a digital dystopia lies the third, and perhaps most plausible, future. This is the hybrid reality, a world that is messier, more complex, and more recognizable than either of the poles. It is a future defined not by a total victory for one model, but by a tense, ongoing negotiation between the forces of ownership and the conveniences of subscription. In this version of 2040, the economy has not fully transitioned to one model. Instead, it is bifurcated. For certain core assets, the concept of ownership remains deeply entrenched. Land and housing, for the most part, continue to be bought and sold. The emotional and financial security tied to owning a home is too powerful a cultural force to be easily replaced. While subscription-based co-living spaces are popular in dense urban centers, the suburban ideal of the owned single-family home persists. This creates a foundational layer of ownership in the economy. However, layered on top of this foundation, a vast subscription ecosystem thrives. Most technology, mobility, and household goods operate on a service model. The majority of people subscribe to their phones, computers, and home entertainment systems. Private car ownership has declined steeply in cities, replaced by a competitive market of mobility-as-a-service providers offering everything from e-bikes to autonomous pods. Even within the owned home, a significant number of appliances and smart systems are subscription-based, their advanced features contingent on a monthly fee. This creates a blended household economy, a mix of owned assets and rented services, a constant balancing act between equity and expenses. This hybrid world leads to the emergence of a conscious and often ideological social divide. Society splits into two broad camps, not based on wealth, but on philosophy. On one side are the service maximizers. These are the people who fully embrace the convenience and flexibility of the subscription world. They value efficiency and access above all else. They are comfortable with sharing their data in exchange for a more personalized and frictionless life. They seamlessly integrate dozens of services, their lives managed by a sophisticated personal AI that optimizes their subscriptions for cost and utility. They see ownership as a burdensome anachronism and view those who cling to it as Luddites. On the other side are the digital homesteaders. This group prioritizes autonomy, privacy, and resilience. They make a conscious choice to own wherever possible, even if it is less convenient or more expensive in the short term. They actively seek out sell-only products, champion the right to repair, and learn the skills needed to maintain their own possessions. They are wary of smart devices that require a constant connection to the cloud and are meticulous about their data privacy. Their homes might be a patchwork of older, dumber appliances and newer open-source technology that they can fully control. They form tight-knit communities, sharing knowledge, tools, and resources through local co-ops and libraries of things. They are not anti-technology. They are pro-autonomy, and they use technology selectively to enhance their independence rather than create dependencies. This divide is not a source of open conflict, but a constant cultural tension, shaping markets, politics, and even the physical layout of communities. The defining characteristic of this hybrid reality is a state of constant negotiation. The world is a dynamic battleground of competing interests. Consumer advocacy groups, empowered by a more aware public, are in a perpetual struggle with corporate lobbyists. One year, a sweeping right-to-repair bill is passed, strengthening the hand of the digital homesteaders. The next year, corporations find a new software-based loophole to reassert control. The legal system is flooded with landmark cases testing the boundaries of terms of service agreements and the power of the remote off switch. The question of data ownership is never fully settled, resulting in a complex patchwork of regulations that vary by region and by service. This is not a stable or predictable world. It is a system in a state of dynamic equilibrium. constantly being pulled in different directions. For the average person, this means navigating a complex landscape of choices and trade-offs. Do you subscribe to the new, hyper-efficient smart kitchen service, knowing it will monitor your family's eating habits? Or do you invest in durable, non-networked appliances that you have to maintain yourself? Do you choose the affordable, convenient mobility subscription? Or do you buy a used, repairable electric car from a niche manufacturer? These are not just consumer choices. They are statements of personal values. This most likely future is not a clean narrative with a clear outcome. It is a reflection of our own divided nature. Our desire for both convenience and freedom, for both security and autonomy. It is a world where the future of our relationship with the material world is not a settled question, but an open, ongoing, and vital debate that shapes the lives of every citizen every day. We stand today at a quiet but profound crossroads in the long story of humanity's relationship with the material world. We have traced the path from owning records to streaming music, from buying software in a box to subscribing to the cloud. We have seen how this logic, powered by the Internet of Things and the irresistible economics of recurring revenue, is now poised to redefine our connection to the most fundamental objects in our lives. We have explored the divergent paths that branch out from this single point in time. There is the path towards a seamless utopia, a world of radical sustainability and access, liberated from the burdens of ownership and waste, but one that requires an immense and perhaps naive trust in the benevolent regulation of corporate power. There is the dark reflection of this path, the digital dystopia, where convenience becomes a gilded cage, locking a generation of perpetual users into a state of precarious dependence, their autonomy traded away for frictionless service. And there is the messy, complex, and most probable path of the hybrid reality, a future of constant negotiation, where communities of digital homesteaders work to preserve the values of ownership and autonomy in a world dominated by the seductive ease of subscription. None of these futures are inevitable. They are not destinations we are destined to arrive at, but currents in a river we are navigating right now. The outcome will be shaped by the countless small and large choices we make, both as individuals and as a society. It will be determined by the laws we choose to write, the businesses we choose to support, the technologies we choose to embrace, and the values we choose to prioritize. This transition forces us to ask a fundamental question, one that goes beyond economics and touches the very definition of a good life. What does it mean to be wealthy in the 21st century? For centuries, wealth was measured in what we owned: land, property, durable goods. It was a tangible metric of stability and security. But perhaps we are moving towards a future where true wealth will be measured differently. Will wealth be defined by the number of services you can seamlessly access, a measure of your integration into the managed world? Or will true wealth be measured in the degree of your freedom from systemic control, in your autonomy, your privacy, and your ability to function independently of any single corporate or state-controlled platform? Will the wealthiest person in 2040 be the one with the premium, all-inclusive subscription to life as a service, or the one who owns their own home, repairs their own vehicle, and controls their own data, living a life of greater friction, but also of greater sovereignty? We are not the first generation to face such a shift. The story of our relationship with things has always been in flux. There was a time when the most important form of ownership was land. Then, the Industrial Revolution made the ownership of machinery and capital the new locus of power. In the 20th century, for many, the dream became the ownership of a home and the consumer goods that filled it. Now, we are entering a new chapter. The transition to a service-based economy could be as profound as the shift from feudalism to capitalism, or from an agrarian to an industrial society. It is a reordering of the fundamental rules of the game. The future, in the end, is not rented yet. The terms of service for the coming decades are still being written. They are being written in the code of new technologies, in the fine print of user agreements, in the debates happening in city councils and national legislatures, and in the quiet conversations we have with ourselves about what kind of world we want to build. Every time we choose to repair an old device instead of replacing it, every time we support a local business that sells a durable product, every time we question the data we are asked to share, we are casting a vote. We are adding a sentence to that contract. The great challenge before us is to make these choices consciously, to understand the deeper patterns at play beneath the surface of our daily lives. The story of ownership has always been the story of human freedom, and we are the ones writing the next chapter now.